Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. One of our viewers, Vimel, asked me to compare and contrast for you two of my favorite modern cities, Singapore and Dubai. So today we're going to discuss Singapore versus Dubai. Which city is better? I'm going to go through a whole bunch of different criteria, fill you in if you haven't been to either of them. This will be a fun experience. And let's dive in. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. Thank you for subscribing. And if you'd like help with relocating anywhere abroad, getting a residency permit, getting citizenship somewhere, we can help you with all of that and much more, as well as international tax optimization, paying the lowest legal amount of tax possible, it's forming companies, etc. You can book a call, calendar.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below. Or you can send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so this is a cool comparison because of the fact that in many respects, a lot of people would view Dubai as maybe a new Singapore. I would say that it has been called the new Switzerland, maybe the new Monaco, and yes, the new Singapore. So we're going to talk about them and go through it. So let's start with the weather. All right, if you have ever been to either of them, I think you can complain about the weather in both. There's pros and cons one way or another. I don't think it's easy to argue that one has better weather per se. In the summer, Dubai is unbearably hot. You pretty much need to live inside, okay? If you're willing to be in the massive air-conditioned malls and move through air-conditioned setups, okay, it's doable, but not so good otherwise. On the other hand, if you're talking about, the spring, the fall, the winter, actually the weather's quite nice. So, in that regard, not a bad way to go. On the flip side, Singapore is fairly consistent. It is warm, but not hot the way that Dubai is. However, it's very humid. So Dubai is a lot of the year not particularly humid. In the summer, like August, etc., September, it gets quite humid, and people will find it unpleasant if that's their style of weather that they dislike. But I mean, it rains a lot in Singapore. It almost never rains in Dubai. Okay, around New Year's this year, it had a few days of kind of continual rain, and that was surprising. But yeah, rains regularly in Singapore. The other thing that I noticed about Singapore, which a lot of people don't really talk so much about, is you tend to have this haze all the time. So it's rarely actually really clear, sunny skies in Singapore. Dubai also will tend to get a haze, sort of the dust or pollution or whatever it is hanging over the city. But on the other hand, you definitely get the blue skies. So, depending on the time of year, I certainly would say in good times anyway, Dubai's weather is better than Singapore's. But then again, in the bad times, I mean, Dubai is just not so fun. So that's one factor. The next is with respect to something related, and this is walkability. So some people may not care about this. I do actually. I really enjoy walking, and it's just a nice thing for me. Overall, I find Singapore to be quite a bit more walkable than Dubai. Now, it does depend where you live or where you're spending your time. For example, the marina has a long, long promenade, which is very walkable. You can go to places like Albarari and go to the parks and walk there. There's some areas around Business Bay that are fairly walkable, but in general, I would say that Dubai is not really a city that's well set up to walk, although it's, again, more walkable than people would maybe sometimes at first believe once you just start walking. On the other hand, this is partially because of the fact that it's just really hot in the summer, and as a result, people aren't going to walk. I find Singapore much better, however, recognizing that Singapore also, like I said, rains a lot, so you have to deal with that. One interesting thing in Singapore I find is they have this whole underground world there. I remember the first time I was trying to cross a street and couldn't find out where the crosswalk was, and it turns out you go underground to do that. And then you go underground and you discover, wow, there's like stores and restaurants and shops and food courts and all this kind of thing. So yeah, just in general, I would say Singapore is generally more walkable. Now we can go to nature from there. How do you like the nature in each? Clearly, Singapore is just an incredibly beautiful city. I mean, they have this concept of city in a garden, literally not a garden in a city, but a city in a garden, and they fulfill on it, better than probably anywhere. It's incredibly green. They've done a fantastic job of it. It's well manicured, etc. Dubai, not so good in that regard. I mean, They're working on it. They have a vision for 2040 to be transformed 70% of the city into green space. They've actually done a remarkably good job given that it is desert. But in this respect, I mean, you just can't compare. On the other hand, you know, you have the water. And I would say that it's probably somewhat close. There's trade-offs, like whether if you're going to go out to the sea. I mean, you have the beaches. There's more accessible beaches for sure in Dubai. And, you know, so that's good. I don't love the water or the beach in either Singapore or Dubai. I think it's pretty mediocre, but it is there. And I would say that Dubai beats it in terms of kind of that beach experience, if that's what you're going for. On the other hand, what if we just talk about the overall, you know, aesthetic appeal of the city? I mean, again, these cities are like, they're very competitive, right? For me personally, I mean, the Dubai skyline is just one of the most unrivaled out there. So I prefer the Dubai skyline to the Singapore skyline personally. On the other hand, if you're just kind of looking at the city as a whole, and you're looking at other factors like, you know, the design of restaurants, etc. I mean, there's a lot of good places in Singapore. However, I just don't think you can beat Dubai. Like, Dubai has just so many amazing, nice places where you can go out and you're just like, wow, this place is beautiful. Like, look at the decor, look at how they've set this up, look at the views, look at this. So yeah, I would say both are great, but I would give Dubai the edge in this one. We can go from there into the subject of safety. And here they both, again, are like neck to neck. These are both very safe places. This is the type of place where I feel no problem. I was out yesterday meeting with a business partner and client, and I had to take a call, and I just left my things sitting on the table and I walked away. And I'm gone for like half an hour, and it's not a problem. You can go back, you can pick up your things, everything is good. Very, very safe. Singapore, same idea. These are some of the safest cities in the world. And so just in general, quite good. However, I would say that because of the way that the liberties are, now granted, again, there's like some restrictions in both cases, but in particular, I would say cultural, it's not, you don't have cultural restrictions this in the way that people quite believe in Dubai, but there's definitely a little bit more edge in that, where you're probably more likely to inadvertently get in trouble with the law in Dubai than you are in Singapore. And so I'd give Singapore a slight edge on this safety, even though they're both, you know, really good. So that's that. And we can look at something like the entertainment. Okay, what about the entertainment? Here, I think Singapore, you know, has had a reputation for a long time of being a fairly boring city. There's kind of this story of live in KL, do business in Singapore, party in Bangkok. And just generally speaking, it doesn't have the entertainment vibe that some of the places do. Granted, they've brought in a bunch of stuff over the last few years. Basically, I would say there's been a notable change since they introduced Marina Bay Sands, which is the big hotel, which has kind of got that famous infinity pool looking out over Marina Bay, and you can see the downtown area, etc. So it's good, but realistically, not in comparison to Dubai. I mean, Dubai is pretty world-class in entertainment. It's not maybe at the same level as Vegas or New York or London or something like that, but it's really good. There's just a plethora of things to do if you want to. There's almost anything you can imagine. You want to go golfing, you want to do top golf, you want to go to polo, you want to go to some shows, some movies, you want to go to do escape rooms, you want to, you know, again, go out and have some sort of entertainment. You want to go to nightclubs. You want to go to kind of like restaurants / clubs. You want to go to arcades, like whatever it is. They've just done a really good job of bringing most of that into Dubai. Now, I'd say it's not quite got the flavor of local expressive culture that you get in like London and New York or something, but certainly it's more so than you get in Singapore. So in this regard, I would say it's a better entertainment city, etc. What about the costs? In terms of costs, I mean, these are both quite expensive cities. There's been some studies that suggested that Singapore is the most expensive city. Having spent time in a lot of different cities around the world, I disagree with this, and actually the Singapore government put out like a counterpiece to it when the report came out, so you can go down that road. I would say cost of housing is a fair bit more expensive in Singapore than in Dubai. Depends again where you live and how you live and things like this, but in general, I would say it's more expensive. Food, maybe it's more expensive in Dubai. It depends what you're buying. You can certainly find ways of eating cheaper and find ways of eating more expensive, but just in general, it's pretty expensive to go out to Dubai. And it's pretty expensive to go out in Singapore as well, but just the fact that pretty much everything is imported. In general, I would say that if you are eating the way that locals eat anyway, and let's put it this way, eating culturally, so where you get really expensive in Singapore is if you try to eat a Western diet in a country that's Asian, right? That's sort of, you'll have a lot of these things are more expensive. But in general, I would say you're talking about probably a little bit more expensive in Dubai. However, the cost of housing is much more than that differential. You have things like electronics tend to be cheap in both places. You have things like fashion are pretty comparable, probably somewhat more expensive in Dubai for clothing, etc., but maybe less expensive for jewelry. So, you kind of balance it out. So overall, I would say Singapore, slightly more expensive city, but both are expensive. What's next? We can look at cleanliness of the place, which I guess factors in a little bit into the overall aesthetic, both super clean places. However, I would say that the appearance of Dubai, just because it's dusty, is less clean than Singapore is. I mean, Singapore, they do just a really good job of making it clean, but you add to this, the fact that it's wet, and that makes it, you don't get this dust, etc. So yeah, just in general, they're both really clean places, although the air pollution is quite bad in Dubai, so there's that. Another thing I may note about the costs on the two is Singapore is really expensive for transportation. If you want to have a vehicle, they have something called certificate of entitlement, which is basically you're going to pay, about 3 times the price of the vehicle often to have the right to drive this car in the city for a period of 10 years. So for example, a Toyota Prius could cost you 120 grand or whatever. And so it just gives you some idea. Versus in Dubai, where fuel is super cheap, cars are well priced. Okay, you should make sure that you get GCC outfitted vehicles, but otherwise pretty much no issue. And so yeah, that's definitely an advantage. You get fairly low cost of service in both, but certainly lower, I would say, in Dubai. So just in general, Singapore, more expensive city across those ways. And if you want to own vehicles, that's not so good. We could look at public transit though, which is the other side of it. Getting around in Singapore is just generally easier than in Dubai. Dubai's public transit is not very good. It just doesn't cover most areas. It is not especially quick, I wouldn't say. You're often covering pretty long distances. You're in a situation where on top of that, you just are like, okay, maybe you're going to take a taxi or something, try and get around, or you're going to take an Uber, etc. You Grab in Singapore. The problem with it is the road system is not very well designed. So often if I want to go over here, I have to go here first and then do this big loop around. Traffic can be fairly bad. It's known for a lot of accidents. One of the things the certificate of entitlement system has done in Singapore is just plain cut down on traffic, cut down on emissions, etc. And that's worked really well. So it's just easier to get around Singapore. The Singapore transportation network, I would say, works just really well. So that's positive. What else have we got here? Let's talk about immigration. Way harder to get into Singapore than Dubai. Singapore is a pretty difficult place to move to today. There was a time when it used to be quite easy. Those days are past. You can get in under certain situations by having a company and employing some people and things like this, or having a work permit. With COVID, they ended up kind of knocking out a lot of the work permit stuff, so that kind of went away for a lot of people. And Dubai is just outrageously easy to move to. Whether you set up a company or you buy a piece of property or whatever, the investment and the ease of coming in, super simple. One of the best examples of a streamlined immigration process for a lot of people. So much, much better experience there. I guess along the lines of costs as well, but a little bit different, are taxes. So you have VAT in Dubai, which is 5%. You have GST in Singapore, which is 7%. you have a top tax rate of 22% personally in Singapore, graduated tax rates up to that, 17% for businesses, no capital gains tax, it's what's called a single imputation system, so there's no tax on dividends paid out for a company, so realistically you should never pay more than 17%. Dubai just has zero tax. Very hard to compete with zero, right? Zero is, well, we like zero in this particular case. So yeah, just much better system in Dubai in that regard. We can go on to other things that some people may care a lot about, which is the connectivity. Now, it depends where you want to go here. I wouldn't say that either Singapore or Dubai are especially well situated unless you're like going to specific areas. So let me give you an example. I'm living in Dubai. I just went to London last week. I mean, it's an 8-hour flight to London. This is not a short flight. Okay, you sleep, you have a good time, all right, great, nice experience, but it's an 8-hour flight, right? Even if you're to go to someplace like Bulgaria, which is much closer, you're still talking about a 5-hour flight. So although it's centrally located and it's a fantastic hub that's really well connected, I mean, you have Emirates, Fly Dubai, and Etihad all based out of that little area. And it's a big hub for traveling from Asia to Europe. And so if you want to go to Maldives or Seychelles or Mauritius or, Tanzania or Kenya or, whatever, right? All kinds of these places, Europe, North America, South America, Asia, like you can get connecting flights pretty easily, a lot of direct flights. That's really good. However, unless you're going regionally, like, okay, if you want to go to Bahrain, it's right close. If you want to go to Saudi or Oman or Egypt or something, these places are quite close. But on the other hand, you are pretty far from Europe, which is where a lot of people would want to go. You're actually not that close to a lot of Africa. Not that really anything is that close to a lot of Africa, but anyway. And if you want to go to a bunch of parts of Asia, I mean, you're still talking about 5-hour flights or something, right? Okay, maybe 4 hours to Maldives or something. That's not super close, right? It's not like being in Europe where you can jump on a plane from Barcelona and be in Paris or be in New York or, sorry, not New York, be in London or Munich or Rome or something really, really quickly, right? That sort of proximity is really nice in Europe if you want to be in Europe. If you don't want to be in Europe, not so great. Similarly, you have something like this in Singapore. So Singapore, if you want to go to Malaysia, to Thailand, to Bali, to all these surrounding areas, yeah, really well connected, fantastic, super low cost flights, great service through Singapore. Like if you want to do Singapore business class or first class, awesome. By the way, Emirates business class, first class, also awesome. Etihad, same sort of deal. So you've got like great airlines positioned there. And you have Fly Dubai to try and be somewhat cheaper, although typically not competitive with like AirAsia, right? So you have that. The airports, I mean, the Dubai airport is good, but the Singapore airport, Changi airport, is like the best. Literally, it has won the award like every year for the last, 10 years or something. It is the best airport. So I'm gonna give Singapore a slight edge on this one, but it really depends on where you're wanting to travel. So if you're wanting to be regional within Asia, it's outstanding. If you were wanting to get to Europe, well, it's really far. If you're wanting to get to North America, they're both really far. If you're wanting to go to South America, they're both really far. So yeah, that's kind of, I think the reason why I'm giving Singapore a bit of an edge, aside from the fact that their airport is better, is because of the fact that it's more likely that you would want to travel within the region of Asia than that you would want to travel within the region of the Middle East. But it could depend for your situation. So those are factors. Other things that might be interesting to you culturally, I mean, these are both interesting places to be. The different, like when you're in Dubai, it's 90% expats. This is a very unique environment. There's not a lot of parts of the world where you can go where it's 90% expats. And that makes it something that it doesn't really have its own culture. Its culture is formed by the people there, but it makes it really easy to connect, etc. It's super English friendly. Some people were asking me the other day, what about Arabic? It's like, no. Arabic is a non-issue in Dubai. It's pretty much 100% English. Yes, they have signs that also they're in English and Arabic, but everybody speaks English. Almost nobody that you're going to encounter is going to speak Arabic. So that's something. Similarly, if you're looking at Singapore, I mean, it's like an English city, so super easy if you're somebody who speaks English. If you're somebody who speaks, some other language, well, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult. If you're coming from, say, China or something like that, it's going to be easier for you. There's going to be more people who are going to speak Mandarin, or if you're coming from Hong Kong, Cantonese, than you're going to get in some place like Dubai typically. But just in general, yeah, that's the deal. In terms of kind of sophistication of services, so banking, etc., I would say generally it's a higher quality, a higher standard in Singapore. They've just kind of got a more refined financial services sector that's there. And I would say across the board in terms of service, there's a lot of service in Dubai, but the quality of service is not necessarily at the same level, depending, but usually not amazing. So yeah, that's pretty much an overview. I think they're both great cities. I think for most people today, I mean, there's a reason that most people are going to Dubai, and it's largely due to accessibility, openness, ease of access. Like I've said for a long time, it's the only world-class or large world-class zero-tax city in the world. So hence, that gives it a really unique stature. Singapore's great. I love Singapore. There's a good chance that at some point in time I will probably, find myself spending a lot more time in Singapore. But that being said, at this stage, I think for most people, their preference is going to be Dubai, certainly as a place to live, and secondly, as a place to visit. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you on the next video.